Hello and welcome back to another episode of Power Rangers Lore. Today we're going to talk about another of the redeemed villains who became heroes at the end of their arc. Now, who are we going to talk about today? Well, none other than Rancic. Yes, Rancic, the main antagonist of Time Force. He would appear as a major character shown in the series, as in the first episode he would slay the Red Ranger of the Time Force right on screen in front of everybody. And I mean, like, cut him down brutally. It is the biggest impact on screen death that I have seen as a kid of that age. Like, I thought, well, maybe he'll come back. Nope, he was dead. There was no given, he is dead. Now, who is Rancic? Where did he come from? And why is he so important? Well, starting it off, Rancic was created from a chemical accident which occurred in a factory in the year 3000. Now, mind you, he is from the year 3000. However, we don't know if he was human or he was born out of that accident itself. I want to say he was human, just by evidence that we're going to explain later on. But I want to say he was a human worker that basically got disfigured, heavily deformed, and had a huge scarred face. He had pustules that were looked like a massive radiation dosage to his entire body. Now, after this, his heart grew colder and colder until he founded a criminal empire of rogue mutants and became their feared, dominating, deadly, powerful leader that would basically do whatever it took to get the job done. Now, Jenna, the leader of Time Force at the time of this crew, now she was the Pink Ranger, but she was mainly the leader of this entire group, would state at one point people did try to help Rancic, but he turned them all away. And I want to say because he saw pity in their eyes rather than actual help. And he didn't want their pity, he wanted their actual help. And I think that spurns a lot of would-be people to become like bitter in that way, just normal people in themselves. Now, during his time before becoming a criminal, he would stumble upon 3 statues in the far-along wastelands of the Time Force. And this would be statues, none other, of orgs. Yes, orgs. Not like orcs, but orgs. What are orgs? Well, they're actually not from this main series. They are from the Wild Force series. Would be coming after this one. Sorry, I had a little brain fart there. So they would be the main antagonists. See, these 3 orgs had survived and were reincarnated when Master Org Force brought them all back, and they were not released. These 3 would remain there and would be freed by Rancic, after they made a deal. They'd offer him power in exchange for their freedom. Now, he only agrees for one thing, that because their goals are on the line, they both hate humans. And orgs are basically also born of Earth, but are out of the toxicity of it all. So basically just like him. He was born out of the radiation that humans sped off, and orgs are the same way. They are born out of the radiation, the chemicals, the trash, the garbage, all that type of stuff. That's them. That's what they do, the pollution of the world. So they were basically on the same team. They go, well, we both want the same thing, death to humans, and we kind of work off the same thing. So they make a deal. Now, they grant him incredible strength in exchange for materials to create bodies for themselves, because they could not release themselves. So he got his bone swords, and they became part mutant. However, he is not the only mutant, because those 3 orgs would go back in time, and that'd be the last time we see them in Time Force. Now, Rancic would, before he became this criminal mastermind and overlord, he was bitten by another mutant. Not one of the org mutants, but others that are out there, because there's a lot of radiation, there's a lot of different things going on. The Time Force is good, but they can't be everywhere, and there's a lot of cutting corners. And the Miss Mutant who bit him would be Venomark. Now, this basically his bite would basically makes his blood toxic. I want to say, like, it's very complicated what it actually is doing, but essentially it is making his entire blood and chemical composition of his innards very toxic, which is basically can happen. It's a venom thing. It's how it kills us, normally from snake bites. Now, he is rescued by a kind-hearted human named Dr. Fricks. Now, he became so dependent on this serum that Dr. Fricks developed. It was the only thing keeping him alive, and if he didn't take it after a certain amount of time, he'd basically die. Now, as a reward for the scientist of helping him, he sets him on basically the lab on fire and leaving the scientist to die. He even stole his Silobot technology and built an army of robot foot soldiers, which is kind of how he became his true mastermind ruler of all the mutants. Now, this would have a major impact on the overall storyline because Dr. Fricks was not killed. Now, escalating on with his plans, Rancic would attempt to conquer Millennium City and basically would be captured and be sent to Time Force Prison in a cryo prison. Now, he was thwarted in his attempt to do some other things before then by none other than Alex, the original Time Force Ranger, but would be rescued, and that's when he would cut down Time Force Red Ranger Alex, who was the lover of none other than the Pink Ranger Jen. Now, but he was saved by none other than his daughter Nadira and his fellow minion, part robot, part human cyborg, Frax. They escaped and accomplished Rancic's goal of going back in time to the year 2001, where none of Time Force is at, and they're basically nothing's there. They can just conquer it. No one's going to stop them. And it's actually a legitimate plan. He brings in his entire army of robots and mutants that are still in cryo down to this Earth, and basically starts going ham on Earth. Now, he would be followed by none other than Jenna and the other Rangers, minus the Red Ranger, of course, to 2001, which they would crash on their ship with no way possibly going back. Now, later on in the series, they have different times where he would nearly defeat the Rangers, or he'd constantly be defeated by the Rangers, but he'd still have a plan. The major thing that threw off this plan was Nadira kind of falling for none other than the Blue Ranger at the time, mainly because she was saved by him by one of the other mutants who had basically gone a little awry. And instead of basically scolding for that and going, no, you need to find somebody else, he accepts it because he loves his daughter more than anybody else, like deeply loves her. And because of this, would go on to basically making sure that when they were fighting against the Rangers, he was not injured, even picking up and dusting it off, confusing the hell out of all the Rangers, and even the Blue Ranger. They were going, what is going on here? It is very comical for an entire episode to see this, the big bad villain being Father of the Year, making sure like, hey, you bring her back by 6. It is very intimidating, going, wait, am I supposed to destroy you? I mean, you really have to see that part to really appreciate it, how bonkers it was. Like, in the middle of a fight, Rancic comes out of nowhere, stops the villain from killing the Blue Ranger, and basically goes, he's off limits. It's very comical, in my opinion, because it throws off everybody, even the villains, even the heroes. Everyone's going, what the heck's going on? And the fight just kind of ends after that. Now, let's talk more about what's going on from there, because as I said earlier, Frax was kind of Fricks. Oh my gosh, I've messed up the names. Dr. Fricks. Sorry. There's so many different names here. Fricks, Frax, and Fiddlesticks. Just say that. Now, Dr. Fricks would not be dead, as I said earlier. He would actually be Frax. How he was able to basically barely survive and transfer his consciousness, or whatever is left of his brain, into the body of Frax is not entirely known. But Frax would basically betray Rancic and destroy all his serum. Now, this would be a major issue for Rancic. He's basically, he reveals right before he escapes that he was the robotic modification of Dr. Fricks, and has sworn vengeance on Rancic. But why did he take so long to do this, unless he goes, there's no way for them to actually do anymore? There's no way to make any more of this serum. However, unfortunately for Frax's plan, Biolabs company had begun producing serum by replicating a sample that Wes had found during the Venomark's release. Now, Venomark was released, and it was a major issue. Now, it was basically Frax who released Venomark, and Rancic didn't want him released. Rancic hates him. He's this bitter sworn enemy of Rancic, so it makes sense. And when he's released, he's the one who goes after, basically, Rancic goes after Venomark and helps the Rangers cut him down. He even saves Wes from being infected because he doesn't want anyone else infected by this. Basically, kills the mutant because he could. Now, this would go on, basically, they would take back to his company, or Eric's father's company, which he would later inherit, to basically create the antidote from the serum in order to save the people that had already been bitten by Venomark, because there was no cure. Now, this would be a major thing, and that's why there was a cure for Rancic to come and basically take whatever was left in the company there that was of biolabs. I know that didn't make any sense. I don't need to restate that, but that's what we're going with. It's a major issue in his plan because he didn't think that Frax would have. He's really smart, but I think he just overlooked it, not realizing that how quickly they could have re-engineered this, because it took him his long by himself back in the year 3000 to accomplish the same thing that this company is doing now. But also, they didn't. He built it from the ground up. They had just reverse engineered it, so it makes more sense that way. Now, eventually, Rancic would run out of mutants to unfreeze and manage to capture and reprogram Frax, basically deleting all his memories and the like, and turning it into a all-powerful robotic creation, Doomtron, which plans to destroy the city. Now, this is where a major issue comes with points where Rancic and his daughter Nadira have come to blows. He turns away. She has a change of attitude towards humans after basically helping the Green Ranger give birth to a lady who had collapsed in a clothing store that she was robbing and started to give birth there. So she actually helps the Green Ranger and realizes that humans are not just monsters like she had been told or basically seen, where basically they're always trying to kill her. They're squishy human little flesh balls that are kind of cute sometimes. You know, it's good. It was actually an overall good episode. You have to watch it. Like, it has a major change for her character, and she's already looking for love, and she found love in this little creature known as a human baby. Now, this would try to, she would try to say, Dad, we don't need to destroy these people, and Rancic wouldn't hear it. He's already gone on a warpath. He's already ticked off. All his plans are failed so far, and he's not going to basically allow it to happen. Now, in the end, he would see that basically that he hit Nadira, who was crying and clutching a human baby again, and he's horrified by the fact that he's nearly killed his own child, and he immediately just stops fighting and checks on her. Now, because he cares more about her, and his realization of his anger, he's realized what he's done. Now, Nadira, basically using a baby as a rescue as an example, got to see humans not as bad as he thought they were, and he basically, through her, was able to figure out that maybe it wasn't worth it all, and he turns himself in. Now, here's a major question that I thought was kind of a flaw so far, because there's still more to the story. Because I said it's a redemption story. Besides this little part, him turning himself in, there's more to go on. He's a much bigger arc. Who was Nadira's mother? Now, was she just another mutant that he just adopted as a kid, or was there somebody else? We don't know, and I feel as though we need that answer, and I hope we eventually get that. Now, in Wild Force, which would appear about a year later, Rancic is willingly imprisoned in the future and came back to the present to help the Time Force Power Rangers as well as the Wild Force Power Rangers to stop the Mute Orcs that Jen had been tracking. Now, he had already seen the error of his ways because of basically his anger and all his hatred towards humans had nearly left him basically killing his own daughter. And along with his daughter, he and the Time Force Rangers all go back in time to basically help them out to defeat these Mute Orcs, who are nearly indestructible and stronger than anybody else they've recently fought. Now, he would go on and nearly sacrifice himself after fully explaining the process of Mute Orcs and taking down the mutant powers of the Mute Orcs, making them normal orgs again, sorry. However, it would seem that he was killed. However, that's not true, because it is later turned around when Nadira brings back that he is fully human again with no scars. It's very impressive. Now he's completely human at this point, and he's seen basically cooking steaks and the like with his family and the Rangers in the end of the episode, except for he was only really approving of Lucas and Nadira, while the rest, anyone else who flirted with Nadira, he kind of like growled at. Now this is the last redeeming characters who became a full redemption story, and one of my favorites so far, because in truth he was not a monster like the rest of them. He was just a guy who was given a bad hand in early life, and he turned himself around with the love of his daughter, and basically that's it. The love of his daughter is what really turned him around. She told him, hey, there's other ways to do this. Humanity isn't that bad. And so he's one of the few villains to find a full redemption arc, and one of the few main villains to ever do it. I don't think there was any others besides Rita Repulsa and Lord Zed being turned human again against their will. And arguably, I don't think Lord Zed was ever human. So, there we go. At least in the main canon storyline. We know in the comic books it's a different thing, but that's a comic book universe, completely different storyline there. Now, let's go on his powers, strengths, and abilities. Now, he is very strong and can easily bend basically metal boxes, bend metal boxes, break them up, send them flying. He is immune to nearly every attack thrown at him and can summon swords out of his body from his bones. He has energy projection. He can throw blue and green energy beams. Much like the rest of the villains, he has telekinesis, able to lift objects and basically go into the minds of Rangers. He has basically, did you ever watch Naruto with the guy who can pull bones out of his limbs without any repercussions? That's basically what he's able to do. However, he does feel the pain. He pulls mainly out of his knee swords, and from his back he's able to pull out like a broadsword. So depending on the side of the bone, he can pull out daggers, he can pull out bigger swords, no matter what goes on. He's expert swordsman and martial arts going on. He has what? He can understand the robot language, that of his robot minions, which makes sense because he basically programmed them after Frax, before Frax even showed up. He has the ability to do a shockwave kick. Yes, he can create shockwaves. Now, that's mainly it. His major weakness is his addiction to the serum, only because he needs that serum to keep alive. Now, if it wasn't for this, I think that he wouldn't have any major weaknesses at all. So, I don't know. If you guys like this character, please let me know. I really did like him. I liked his entire story arc. As soon as we mentioned the fact that redeemed heroes, he's one of the first people redeemed villains. I keep saying redeemed heroes, but redeemed villains. I was the first one that came back and I go, yes, this is the one I need, and I love this. Now, I hope you guys enjoy. You have a good one. May the power protect you always. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe at the end of this video. All your likes help me out, and all your watchers do too. Thank you very much, guys. I really like to discuss with you guys what your topics are. May the power protect you always.